Oh, and I am live. Hello, hello, and happy Wednesday. No, Tuesday. I'm already mixed up. Can you believe it? And the week just started. But yes, there's always so much on the go. But yes, I'm thrilled to be back here again. I'm just checking notifications as always. So yes, just to make sure. Yes, fantastic. So, yes, hello everyone and happy Tuesday. Yes, it's wonderful to see you all. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Michael Smith, the National Education Manager of Genome Canada, and I'm back live from my palatial estate here in Collingwood, Ontario, Canada. I'm about 2 hours north of Toronto, and oh boy, north, it's very chilly. So perfect, regardless of the weather. Let's just stay inside and sew. Oh, and my sister is here. Lovely. It is wonderful to see you all. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining me today. And yes, as we're looking forward to this new year and starting January off, I've been tidying my sewing room little by little by little. I know many of you are in the same boat. We spend all year making everything, and especially before the holidays, and now we're in cleanup mode, organizing. We need to get a handle on everything before we can resume all these new projects. So I've got this quick little project that you can make when we need to keep all of our tools next to our machine, regardless of what your sewing setup is like. The more organized it is, the more efficient it is, the faster and easier and more enjoyable your sewing is. That's definitely what it should be, at least, is enjoyable. So let me flip around, and once again, I am here on my fabulous Janome CM17, but again, could really be any machine here, and regardless of your setup. You don't have to have a whole big sewing room. Just whatever surface, even if it's on the kitchen table, you need to keep all your tools handy. So yes, today I'm on my fabulous CM17 here, just with some ideas. So you could make this quick little mat, catch-all mat next to your machine. Now, this was mine for years. You will see when you're doing some embroidery, and again, it's backwards, but again, as you're testing some embroidery, for example, as you're testing some decorative stitches there, it's always good to have some extra fabric on hand to do these little test samples first. And then I ended up using, again, nothing goes to waste in my sewing room. I use it over and over and over again, testing out these different stitches, different embroidery. Here's some yarn for some yarn couching. And then when I stopped using this as a sample, because it ended up so full, I had this next to my machine, and here for my like stiletto and my little 4-inch mini duckling scissors, I kept these next to my machine. So there's a home that I could keep everything organized, and especially on the table as we're sewing and maybe using a serger or embroidery machines, we get the vibration of our machine. And I would find, did you ever have some of these tools like roll right off the table? So this is where having this little mat definitely helped. So it would be down here next to my machine with my tools here. But then, of course, I got, the fabulous Janome Pin Pal, which, yes, is good for pins, but I really like using, again, our pins, magnetic pin pal. I like using the pin pal, though, for any magnetic tool, like my seam rippers, my screwdrivers. Again, my 4-inch mini duckling scissors could sit in here. So I didn't really need this little mat anymore, and I figured, time for things to go to the wayside. So instead, look, doesn't that one look much better and more functional? So right next here to my CM17, I have this mat that I have a little cushioning in it. So again, the tools stay here. So even tools like, again, my seam ripper aren't just going to roll off the table no matter how fast I'm sewing or my machine is going with embroidery. I'm not going to lose my tools. Things like, again, my stiletto, I use all the time. So everything is handy. Now, things like this button shank plate, again, when we're going to sew a button on by machine, or we also use this to keep our presser foot level, good to have out handy, but I don't need it like directly in front of my machine, for example. In my setup here, I only have this much room at the front of my table because sometimes I use my knee lifter here. So if I had this, you know, here at the front of my table, for example, I could easily lose it. And I often keep a trash can right under my table here. And how many times has your tools, you know, rolled off into the trash can? Trust me, it happened to me enough where I'm like, no, if I just keep this little mat here, all my little tools like this, or extra bobbins that you're going to need here in the Janome Bobbin Saver, kept all neatly, but they're here on the mat. And then if you were with me, a couple of weeks ago, I made this, you know, cute little felt baskets that we can get a free project in the Inspire tab on janome.com and janome.ca. Keep our needles handy, or again, clips. So whatever you need is not only organized in these little baskets, but again, they sit on this little mat. A little thread that you're going to use for your project. Everything you need for your project is kept here. Oh, if I needed a, you know, zipper for my project, I could have it here. If I'm doing some quilt binding, I could roll up my binding and keep it here. So everything I need for the project is here. Including, I loved this. Now, this is my mat and a perfect time to use some beautiful embroidery, either built into your machine, or this is actually a free embroidery from Janome, Australia, which I'll show in just a moment. So good time to test out your embroidery design. In this case, I use some beautiful multicolored Madeira thread. So you test out some different threads, maybe some metallic threads. Now here, I further embellished with a beautiful row of stitches. You see how perfect they are in the corner. This is the tapering function that is built into my CM17 and built into a number of machines. Now, last week I did the tapering presentation, so you can go back here in the feed on, if you're on Janome Canada Facebook or Janome America, Janome Sewing Machines Facebook, scroll back in the feed to last week, or check on the Janome HQ YouTube or the Janome America YouTube in the lives category, then you'll see me demo tapering. So this is a applique stitch with tapering. This is our regular, one of the heirloom stitches that I call it like a ladder stitch. So whatever decorative stitches you have in your machine, a great time to stitch those out. Everybody says, I've got so many decorative stitches, when would I ever use them? Well, now is a perfect time. I loved this ladder stitch, as I call it, because, oh, look, when I have needles that are still good, but I needed to change out for whatever project I'm doing, I needed to change out my needle. Well, this one is still good. There's still life in it. So I don't want to lose track of it. So boom, it's stuck into this mat there. Things like hand sewing needles stuck in the mat. We know where it is. Things like, yes, my manual needle threader here with my purple tip needle that still has some life in it. Again, we just stick it here. And because this mat, I made it out of felt, simple, inexpensive craft felt we can get easily at the discount store, the craft store. We don't have to worry about raw edges raveling or anything with the felt, but there it is. I seam 2 layers of felt here and just an easy closure on the back. You'll see it's just butted together. They're not overlapped. I wanted this to lay perfectly flat on my table, so you know there wouldn't be any wonkiness, as things wouldn't roll off. So these are just butted together. But then there you'll see the little foam that's in between to keep everything there. So that's why I can stab my needles into it and I don't have to worry about them getting really dull, or I don't have to worry about losing track of them. Nothing's rolling in the garbage. So there is my beautiful little mat. So I will just remove some of my tools here. So I mentioned embroidery. This is a great time if you have an embroidery machine. So test out your embroidery. Now, this is one of the free embroideries from our colleagues at Janome, Australia. Oh, yes, scrap batting works great too next to your machine to keep your tools and everything handy. This is just a little nicer than the, oh, my computer went to sleep. Sorry, I just need to type in my password here, which I don't think I should share with you all. on camera. So let's see. There we go. So yes, you could use the scrap of batting next to your machine as well. The batting at least will make sure things don't roll off. But again, I thought this little mat would be a little nicer. And again, we can use some of the features and decorative stitches in our machine. So if we go here in Canada, you go to janome.com in America. But we can go to, in this case, for Janome Canada, and I go to the Inspire tab, for example. Janome America is a similar setup of their website as well, the Inspire tab. And now we can scroll to embroidery designs, view designs, so we can get a lot of free embroidery designs that are already in the Jeff format. That's Janome embroidery file, so it's already in the Jeff format. So that is great. So we can get free embroidery there, or you type in your browser Janome Australia. It's Janome .com.au for Australia, but it's just type in Janome Australia in your browser. They have an inspiration tab. So click on it and oh, boom, look at all. They've got cute little projects, that cute little pencil case. But then look here. You maybe recognize that 2025, Happy New Year. I used this when I created a Janome Life blog to celebrate New Year's. And there, this is our beautiful embroidery design. These are free embroidery designs. There was 3 in the collection. So we simply download those to a USB stick, and then we bring them over here in our machine. So if I just quickly go into embroidery mode, and then boom, we'll just quickly go through my little file folder. Again, where are my designs? They're on my USB stick. I specifically saved a folder for free embroidery designs. There's those Happy New Year's. And then here in this folder, look at those beautiful designs. Now, the cool thing is these designs here and these designs here, they were created in 2 different sizes. So when I click on one of them, for example, and my carriage is now going to move, and again, it shows us the size of the design. In this case, it was 10.3 by 10.2. But remember, we can always go into our editing mode. And here we can adjust the size. We can go down 20% in most designs, or even go up 20%. Now, in order for me to make this even bigger, I would have to go to select my hoop. I would need a bigger hoop, in this case, that RE46D hoop, that I could make my design bigger as much as I could fill that hoop, boom, and then I could combine it, move it here, and then this is how I could put in more, maybe a font. I could put in my name. Maybe we could do, again, more rows of decorative stitches. So you stitch out your design, and then beautiful, again, however you need to do it. I'm going to switch this back to my machine, regular sewing. So there is our design. So isn't that gorgeous? But again, I moved it down because I wanted to use rows of decorative stitches for our mat here. So to do decorative stitches, again, we have multiple presser feet. This is, again, the F2, or this is the F foot. This is the satin stitch foot that has the groove on the backside, so all those decorative stitches can easily pass. There's the F2, the open toe version, or especially for rows and rows of decorative stitches, rows and rows of decorative stitches, all beautiful, all evenly spaced. I love using the FB, the border guide foot. They have what I call little wings, and you see those little red marks, the groove on the underside, so the decorative stitches can form, but then we can line up the stitches with those red marks, so we don't have to mark up our fabric. It makes it really simple and easy to do. Oh, there, I just had to thread my needle on air live using my fabulous needle threader. So yes, the border guide foot. Now this is for 9mm machines, but it comes available for 7 and 5mm machines. So double check with your Janome dealer. So again, because I had used embroidery, now maybe you could do some piecing of a quilt block for the center of your mat, or it could just be a regular piece of felt. And maybe instead of the embroidery, again, maybe you're just doing rows and rows and rows of decorative stitches to decorate your mat. And again, it could be like a stitch sampler, a great time to use some decorative threads as well. So here I could use, oh, in which case I'll do, no, I will do here. We can, again, use these lines. So if I just want to butt up these, I could use the edge of my foot, or I could space out here. This previous row of stitching is going to go right along that line. Now I could select, again, any stitches. Let's just quickly go into, oh, I love doing these, oh, botanicals. Oh, these long stitches. Again, it's so hard to choose. They're all gorgeous. So let's do that. That's kind of cool, kind of new, kind of modern. So yes, then we just go down, super simple to do. So you embellish your mat however you wish. And again, just look how simple this is by following this previous row of stitching along that red line, so we don't have to worry about marking our fabric. Now, as you'll see, my fabric is going kind of back and forth as this pattern stitches out. So I'm kind of guiding my fabric, but I'm really not controlling it too much. I'm letting the machine do the work for me. So boom, how simple is that? And again, we just do rows and rows and rows of these decorative stitches. So simple to do. Now here I was doing a framework. Again, in my other sample, I used the tapering function. In this case, I just did regular decorative stitches. But again, let's remember, in our sewing machines, many of them the more sophisticated, people wonder, oh, why are they more expensive? Well, we have features like this is a mirror image button. So do you see, in this case, I've got this big square in the right-hand side, but now, boom, that big square is over on the left-hand side. So isn't that cool how we can flip our stitches, flip our patterns so they go the opposite way? So isn't that cute? So when we do our rows and rows and rows of decorative stitches here, and the great thing is when we do the embroidery, it's already on stabilizer, but if you're not going to do an embroidery, then make sure, again, whatever decorative stitches you do, you have a stabilizer under your felt to support those decorative stitches. So once I have that done, and what size you do your mat is so scientific. For me, I just went, okay, this is the setup of my machine, the setup of my table, and I literally measured from my machine to this other little carrier. I demonstrated these again the other week, and how to organize your sewing table, another perfect use of those decorative stitches. But so again, this always stays here in my table. So I literally just measured from the side of my machine to here. How big is this? In this case, I think it was about 11 inches. So I cut my felt. I like to make my pieces bigger. So I cut my felt, I think in this case, it was about 11.5 inches. So then, and I kept it even bigger for the embroidery to make sure I had enough fabric to hoop this. It stitched out beautifully, and then I could trim out the mat later. So I like making it bigger. So in this case, this mat is going to finish at 9 inches, but cut it a bigger, 10 inches, 10.5 at least. Because sometimes when we do this embroidery and we do all this decorative stitches, sometimes if things go a little wonky during our stitching, we can square this up later and neaten up these raw edges later. So this is 9.5, but then I cut it down to 9 inches afterward. Now on the back, again, I just have it butted together, the two pieces a felt. This is literally, in this case, I want it to finish at 9 inches. So I just cut 4.5 and 4.5 equals 9 inches. They're 9 inches long. So once I square up, I'm going to do more stitching on this sample here, and then I'm going to square it up to 9 inches. And then I literally just butt these. They're just butted together. Now, if this was regular fabric, or if I wanted to do more decorative stitches, we could certainly decorate this edge. Or if this was fabric and we worried about raveling, then we could use one of our overcast stitches, one of the zigzag stitches to help finish off that raw edge. We could put it through the serger, so we don't have to worry about the raw edge. Because I didn't want to fold this over and make like a hem, because I didn't want to make anything bulky. I wanted this to lay flat on the table, so then again, the tools wouldn't move around, nothing would fall off the table. So that's why I just left it flat, the butted together, so simple. So when we go, I did yet another, oh, it's like peekaboo reveal. Look at all that beautiful decorative stitching. Even Stitch Composer, I did my name in Stitch Composer that comes with a number of machines. Again, a perfect time to use some of these other features of your machine, some of the decorative stitches that you haven't used. Great time to try it out. And if they didn't really work out that beautiful, or you didn't like the thread, well, it doesn't really matter. This is just going to be a little mat next to your machine to keep your tools on. It doesn't really have to be anything spectacular. You're learning in the process. So once I have my layers trimmed out, and now I'm going to switch out my foot very quickly to the, in this case, it's the 1/4 inch foot, the O foot with a guide. There is a 1/4 inch foot without a guide, whatever is available for your machine. I personally love the guide. So when I lay these, again, 2 pieces down, right sides together, and then I just sew down one side and sew down the other side, a 1/4 inch. And then what I do, instead of like pivoting at the corner, we typically will sew down one side. And when we get to the end, we'll put our needle in, we'll raise our foot, and we'll pivot. And then we'll sew down this side, drop the needle in, raise the foot, and pivot. Well, instead, I like to do what's known as wrapped corners. And this way, the corners end up a little sharper, particularly with this bulkier felt. This technique works really good. I demonstrated this, oh geez, quite a while ago. You'll have to scroll back in the feed in the videos for how to get sharp corners. I do this for pillows, so you could go back to refer that, or again, check Janome Life blogs. So once I have my 2 opposing sides stitched down, what I do is I wrap the corner. I fold, my seam is sewn, I fold my seam allowance over, and then I start sewing. Let me get back to a regular straight stitch, and then I'm going to sew my 1/4 inch. So from side to side, and then here, now depending on your machine, some of our machines have a dedicated 1/4 inch stitch, and I just press a button and the needle moves and everything, the settings all move. If you have a more, basic machine, in this case, I was able to move my needle over to 9.0. Whoops, let me just hit, no, I want to hit default. There we go. I move my needle over. It would either be to 8.3, or I like going over to 9.0 to make a little scant quarter. And because I'm going through those 2 layers of felt and my stabilizer, I can lengthen my stitch to a 3.0. Oh my gosh, from Belgium, hello. It is great to see you. Thank you for joining me. I love how we have viewers all over the world. So then, again, we're able to do our 1/4 inch and lengthen our stitch because we have these thicker layers. Now, to help feed these layers, again, I want to keep that presser foot nice and level. So this is where this button shank plate comes in handy. If I were to do this wrapped corner, right as it is, do you see my presser foot is down like this? That's not going to feed so easily. by putting, there's two thicknesses of this button shank plate, a little thinner and a little thicker. So by putting this button shank plate behind the foot, do you see that keeps it nice and even? There we go. So as I do, like, oh, it just goes no problem. So as I start that corner, then I can take this button shank plate away. It'll ultimately just come out on its own. So then here I am, just gonna sew right across there and right across there. So as I'm getting into this opposing seam, I just wanna fold, again, this is called wrapped corners. And I do this for pillows all the time, so we avoid that dog ear. But it's also just really nice when we have these bulkier seams. It really works out really good, nice and sharp. So there we go. And then if I wanted to, I could do a little back stitch in the corner just to hold it. We could do a lock stitch, and then boom. So you'll see here is my wrapped corner already, and then we go in, and this is where we can trim our seam allowance down. We don't want to trim into our stitching, but we can trim the bulk of those corners. And again, this is just a little mat for your tools. It doesn't have to be anything grand, but still, we want to practice different techniques, try different things. So when I go to pop this corner out, it really helps if we keep nearby, our little bamboo point turner, for example. We just pop these corners out, and then we use the bamboo point turner to help us refine that corner. So even with the felt and the stabilizer left in there, it still comes out quite flat and quite square. So we could just refine it however long you need to. And then if you need to, take your seam ripper, your stiletto, and you can encourage this corner, like, boom, say, that's pretty good. That's nice and sharp. Even in this bulkier felt with that stabilizer, they still turn out really good. So again, we get these all out beautiful, and then boom. So here is my little mat. But I want to add, this is called Flex Foam. Now there's different brands, different manufacturers. This one specifically is Pellon Flex Foam. You can even join it together, much like we do batting with a big zigzag stitch. So nothing goes to waste. You get this either from your Janome dealer, again, the craft store, fabric store, zigzag it in place if you need to. And this Flex Foam, it's cushiony. So that's what I have in that mat next to my machine, because then again we can stab the pins in, and makes it really handy. So when the Flex Foam, I actually cut it down even smaller. So in this case, again, when I go back to my working sample, again, was cut at 9.5 inches to do my embroidery and all my decorative stitching. Then I'm going to trim it down to 9 inches. And then again, I would sew my back pieces on at 9 inches. But when it came to trim my Flex Foam, I cut it down actually to 8.5. So I made it 1/2 inch smaller than the finished size of my mat. And then I actually cut down a further 1/4 inch. So this mat is cut at 8.25 square for my 9-inch mat. So I ended up cutting 3/4 inch smaller. And why I did that is because of this is about 1/4 inch thick. This mat is thicker, so it's going to take up a little more space because of the height of the Flex Foam. And we have that extra bulk, again, of those bulky felt seam allowances, plus that stabilizer. It's kind of bulky in there. So instead, I cut my flex foam a little smaller because I didn't want to struggle to get this in. I just wanted this to go in like super simple, very easy. And then this way too, if anything were to get on your mat, you spilled your coffee or something on the mat, you can always just remove the flex foam and throw this in the sink, throw it in the wash. But again, it works out so good. Now I would take a little longer and refine my corners, so they lay flatter. But again, it just works out so good. I didn't want, again, anything too bulky. That's why I trimmed the mat down 3/4 of an inch smaller than the outside dimension, whatever it is. So when it's all laying, again, when it's all out flat, the back will just butt together, but then it all lays beautifully flat here. We don't have to worry about our seam allowances, being really bulky or anything. It just lays so flat. And then boom, doesn't that look beautiful next to your table? That it's what your machine is capable of. If you've got an embroidery machine, great time. Again, a free embroidery from Genome, Australia. Or again, rows and rows and rows of decorative stitches. Instead, you could do an applique. Or maybe, again, you could do some piecing. Leftover quilt block, whatever you choose to do. Again, specifically with that border guide foot, you could do rows and rows and rows of decorative stitches, and all of your tools, your needles, everything stays handy. It's not going to be falling all over the table and into the trash can. After that happened to me enough times, I said, wait a minute, I need something better. So yes, that gives you a little idea of something that you could do. Again, when the weather is terrible, you just stay inside and sew, and use. The great thing about felt, especially, you use up all those scraps, and any scraps of stabilizer, save them all. You can use them all for everything. So thank you everyone so much for joining me today. I hope you have a fabulous day, and I will be back here in the Genome Sewing Machines Facebook page and Genome Canada Facebook page tomorrow with some more sewing tips and tricks. So I hope you'll join me then. Thank you so much. Bye.